It was a very, very awkward, clunky type of segment, and that's kind of been the description of this entire program. And then it was time, Wei, for the face-to-face segment. And one day we're going to get a YouTube playlist of these, and Wei Ting is probably going to relive this one.
I look forward to the shoot interview with
Yes.
either of these participants where we can just tell all on what exactly went
Yes,
on.
that's what I want, like the High Spots shoot interview in 2050 with Tiffany Stratton about this segment. So a couple weeks ago, they did their kind of satellite face-to-face where Charlotte Flair basically steamrolled Tiffany, and they've used that as kind of like the legit issues here between these two, that she just steamrolled her in this segment. So this was the comeuppance for Tiffany to obliterate Charlotte. So we have Wade Barrett as the moderator, as Tessitore mentions. Literally, Charlotte steamrolled her in their last segment. So Flair gets booed, and she says, "That's power." And Tiffany then asks Chicago, "What time is it?" as they yell Tiffy time. And I'm just thinking, God, is this going to be dreadful? And Stratton states that Flair's biggest competitor all these years is the fans. You're never going to win them over. You pretend that you're above them, but then we see you crying on some talk show. So we are...
So that is in reference to an actual interview she did.
This was the Sherry Shepherd show the other day that Charlotte was on. And yeah, she, to my knowledge, this is the first time she's spoken about her divorce from Andrade. And it was like a very, like, she explained like how embarrassed she was, the fact that this was her third divorce, and the fact that there were going to be comparisons made to her father, and she tried to just hide it. And it did not break for quite a few months. It was when the divorce filing finally occurred that it came out, and she talked about this, and just I thought like it was like the most like real set of emotions that you get from a Charlotte Flair, that I think is one of the critiques of the on-screen character, is just like she's just such like this one-dimensional figure in her presentation. And here she is in this incredible like struggle that she's been through, not the least of which is that she's going through this divorce as she's had this year-long knee injury she was also coming back from on top of that last year.
It tells you the mindset that she was re-entering the WWE with ahead of what was supposed to be a big babyface run. If you remember that very first promo after she won the Rumble.
Very much.
She was about to cut a big promo, I'm sure, talking about some of these struggles, getting into sort of that big comeback that she had to
and I'll guarantee you, if you watch, it's up on YouTube, like this interview, and it's only about, like, it's under 10 minutes. I guarantee you, if you watch that segment, you would have thought Tiffany Stratton was the biggest heel in this segment. Because she just rode Charlotte, and all the material was for Tiffany here. And like, anyway, let's go through it first, because I definitely want your thoughts on the segment. So she states how Flair, she goes over, we see you crying on a talk show, yet you think you're above the fans. You're always going to be second to your father, and you're going to be second to me at WrestleMania. Flair just blows this off, saying that's the same verbiage I've heard over the last decade from all my opponents. And now the crowd, it's like super loud boos. Like, this is not quite like Dominic at his peak level, but not too far off. This was really loud.
Yep.
And Flair was really stifled by this. She cannot get anything out. She would like go to start her lines and then just stop. It was almost as though she didn't know if she should continue or ride the boos more. And it just was, I thought, very awkward on Charlotte's behalf. And that just gave Stratton, like, she just kept going here. Stratton says, Flair eventually just like gives up and tells Stratton, you can have the last word. And Tiffany points out that, what were you doing when you were 25? You were trying to become a volleyball player while drinking in your dad's basement. And I'm going to WrestleMania as the women's champion at 25. She says, Charlotte, you've got nothing on me. You're the queen of shit. And Flair then mocks her squeaky voice, which I can guarantee you this is not the first time she has done this, because she seemed too seasoned for this mockery of Tiffany Stratton. And Stratton,
Just before we move on, the problem with like, so her big line was, "What, you're full of shit" or something like that. The word "shit" it was supposed to use as
yes.
like a big exclamation mark. The problem was Stratton stuttered the line, and
Oh, that's
Charlotte
right. And that's what Charlotte
took
jumped
the
on.
opportunity to jump on it, which completely killed the line because she talked over the
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
Anyway, please continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the part that Charlotte just jumped on her, mocking her squeaky voice. Tiffany calls her a Nepo baby. Flair qualifies it, "I'm a Nepo queen." And Stratton says that when it's all said and done, you're going to be alone, just like you are outside of the ring. Where what's your record? 0-3, and woos at Charlotte. And I guarantee you most of the audience couldn't even hear this, but Charlotte gets in the line. "So why's Kaiser in my DMs?" It's WrestleMania month on the Post Wrestling Cafe, and we are going to have wall-to-wall coverage of the events from Las Vegas beginning Thursday, April 17th. We're going to be doing daily shows on the Post Wrestling Cafe featuring myself, John Cena, and many more of the Post Wrestling staff. Plus, this month, it is 2 editions of Rewind Away as we cover SummerSlam 1997 and a retrospective of Jumbo Tsuruta. All that, plus coverage of New Japan's Sakura Genesis, Windy City Riot, Collision Course, and of course, Daredevil Born Again on MCU later. PostWrestlingCafe.com, $6 gets you in the door. And this was like a train wreck. And I don't know, it was also like the most significant of their segments because they tried to replicate what Cody and Cena did on Monday, like a personalized promo back and forth.
They tried to do a good promo segment.
Yes.
What you're trying to say. Yeah.
But what this felt like was, first of all, this was like Tiffany's chance to be the aggressor. And it was just so, like, Charlotte was just like totally thrown off. And it felt like she's throwing like real daggers here at Charlotte. So I mean, you can have the idea that they conveyed to people like this grudge aspect, but it was just such a train wreck. So I don't know what you made of it, Way, but what did you feel about these 10 minutes?
I felt very similar to how I felt after their face to face. I thought it was like almost an exact replication, except in front of an audience.
It was the opposite too, like
of their face to face. Yeah, yeah. But I think the same in that it felt every bit as heated, but every bit as awkward, right? And we kind of like, again, talk about this, like in pro wrestling, you want things to feel real, but you also want them to feel perfect, you know? So it's sort of a strange like balance of, I think, what we expect. And I think it was very clear this was heated, but it was far from perfect, I think, from concept to execution. I continue to wonder how much is actually cleared between both parties before like these actual segments, because I almost like you watch a segment like this and you actually feel like Charlotte might be actually getting rattled by some of these lines that are designed to rattle her. And rather than just take it as I think the character should, you know, like in wrestling, sometimes you're on offense, sometimes you're on defense, and you just sell, right? Rather than just sell it, she, for whatever reason, feels the need to speak up on air and continue to steamroll her opponent here in Tiffany Stratton. I thought Stratton like had some really good lines here, whether she came up with them or whether they were written for her. But by the end of it, I'm just left feeling like I saw another awkward segment where one person didn't really let the other person completely get what they needed to out of this. I also thought it kind of made Stratton look pretty cowardly, saying the big line at the end, like the line about the divorce. Then she quickly ran away out of the ring, almost as if like she was scared of the repercussions. Like I don't know why the babyface would be made to do that.
Well, again, if you had watched the Sherry Shepherd segment, you would think Stratton was like just the worst type of heel here, in terms of like going with that as like the segment closer as well, which I think like most of the audience would think the same. Like whatever, if you're not a fan of Charlotte Flair, like it's just like, but obviously I don't think they're just going out there and just winging this stuff. I'm sure but it just, you want to have the balance. Like you don't want it to feel like this choreographed exchange. At the same time, it's when it just, to me, the key here was like Charlotte seemed really just rattled, whether it was from the booze, and not even in such a way that like she was. It was almost like she just didn't know if she should be playing off these boos more or what. But it was a very, very awkward, clunky type of segment, and that's kind of been the description of this entire program. That I don't know what the post Mania path is going to be for these two.
I think it's totally cool to like actually you want people to look like they are rattled by things that are being said, but I rarely think it's okay for people to talk over each other. Like even on a podcast like this, but especially like in a promo segment like that, save that anger for your response. And granted, the crowd wasn't really going to let her fully respond, but I think she could have, pressed on anyway and given us at least some semblance of like what, like a balanced back and forth rather than just ultimately what kind of felt like a one-sided shouting and another person shouting over top of them. So again, another awkward one, but look how much time we're spending talking about it. Maybe ultimately they're just kind of happy that this has created something that people are talking about.
Well, the idea of a segment like this is you want to convey the idea that, this feels real, like with the lines that they're using. Like you want to convey that. And even if it's a mess, if you can get to that level, then it's like kind of mission accomplished. If that was your hope to come out of this segment. So
now when we get to the match, I actually expect the match to be like actually a very choreographed match where like I don't think we'll get this sort of like butting of heads. So can they convey like a real grudge? Like, are these two capable of conveying like a real fight? Because I feel like they're both gymnasts, and I think by nature the match is going to look a lot more patterned.
Well, right? even gymnasts have their violent streak in them. So we'll see.